welcome to our devotionals for this week. Not quite going to finish through the book of Numbers, but we're going to get close. Looking today at Numbers chapter 25, and we see Israel here worshiping another God. And this chapter is a tragedy on many levels. Now, as we'll find out later in Numbers, later this week even, in Numbers 31, Balaam, who had been hired to curse the nation of Israel, but ended up continually blessing Israel instead, he stayed with the Midianites. And there's suggestion that, as we'll see, Balaam gave some ideas of how the Midianites could entice Israel to move away from the blessing God was going to give them. Again, God's blessing was there. He was in covenant relationship with Israel. But if Israel would move out of covenant, then those covenant blessings would not be there. And so Balaam couldn't get God to stop identifying with Israel. He got Israel, or helped entice Israel, to stop identifying with Yahweh, the God it had entered into covenant with. And it was enticement through the worship practices of a local Midianite god. Baal, or Baal would have been kind of the pronunciation, but Baal of Peor. Now, the word Baal, it's the one we're most familiar with the pronunciation of, means master. And so we see another Baal, kind of a bigger, more multinational in a sense, Baal. This is kind of this localized master god of Peor. And part of the worship practices of this Midianite, which is part of the Canaanite peoples, included basically sexual practice outside of that covenant relationship of a husband and a wife. And again, I think we struggle in our modern context to understand idolatry in its ancient context, as well as understanding the idolatries we still have today. Idolatry is still a thing. It's always a thing. One person, I can't remember who, talked about our hearts are, in some ways, our fallen sinful hearts are idol factories. We make idols. And the appeal of idolatry in the ancient world was that it was a system of kind of making sense of things. And so there's forces of nature, for example, the seasons of the year. And so you'd go have sex at the temple or wherever the worship practice was going to be held. And that kind of was a fertility kind of idea. And so if you were helping, or you were worshiping, or you were obeying the God, and it's bringing fertility to the land. Again, I'm being oversimplistic here, but that kind of idea. But idolatry also was appealing because what idolatry offered, and basically it's just worship of other gods apart from Yahweh, still to this day. The appeal of idolatry of these other gods is that it's going to give material well-being, or it's going to give us what we want. But the goal is not becoming moral. The goal is not becoming good. You do the idolatrous practices to get the things you want. Idolatry, again, the ancient world is also very tangible. I mean, you could see the statue to the god rather than Yahweh, who there was no image that could be made because, well, Yahweh had already made the beings who were to image human beings, all people. Idolatry, really at its core, is this merger of our human self-oriented desires with religion. And that can take many forms, ancient and contemporary. So there were men in particular named that from Israel who went and engaged in sex with Midianite women. And again, this is not just going outside of covenant on a human level. This is going outside of covenant on a divine human level. And so Moses is incensed. He calls upon those who are judges, those who are in authority over the various tribes, kind of under leaders to him. You guys got to take care of those in your camps who are a part of this. And even as they're talking, they see it happening. And one man, Phineas, he's just completely incensed by this, and he drives a spear through both a man and a woman together. And God says, well, that act of devotion to him, of repulsion and rejection of sin, acted to cease God's bringing judgment consequence on the whole nation. Again, we need to understand here that God is not against people. He's against sin because of its effect on people, short-term, long-term, eternal terms. Here's a thought for today. The appeal of idolatry. Still today, we don't talk about idolatry, we don't think about idolatry, but when we are seeking something, anything over God, it is our idol, and it can be good things. So here's the question to process. Is the reason you follow Jesus to become like Jesus? Or is it to go to heaven? Is it to avoid hell? Is it to get God's blessing? Is it to be part of a community? There's multiple ways and reasons why, and blessings that we receive from God for following him. But if we ever find ourselves in a place where we want God's blessing even more than we want God, there's an idol at work, and it will lead us astray. So this morning, today, whenever you're listening to this, I encourage you, reflect on who is truly the God you are seeking. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you. And today would you know his peace. God bless.